Okay. All right, everyone, thank you for joining us. Again, like I said, this is Busing 101, and we're going to get started right now. Anna, if you can go to the next slide. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A and not in the chat. We are Advocates for Children. We're a nonprofit organization that protects the rights of students in New York City, their educational rights specifically. If you have any questions after this training, please feel free to call our helpline. The number is here. We also provide guides and resources on our website and training. And we also provide advocacy and legal support to low-income families in New York City who require a higher level of support. This is our contact information. Helpline is the best way to reach us. If you have a question, we have staff that are available to answer questions at any time on Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Also, if you can't reach anyone, please leave a message and we will call you back within 3 days.
So in terms of eligibility for transportation, you have students who are eligible based on their grade and their distance from the school. So students in grades kindergarten through 2nd grade, if they live more than half a mile from the school, they're eligible for transportation. And students in grades 3 through 6 who live further than 1 mile from the school are also eligible for transportation. Students in grades 3 through 6 who live between half a mile and 1 mile from school are eligible for Metro cards, and students in grades 7 through 12 who live more than half a mile from school are eligible for a Metro card only, not busing. In terms of students with disabilities, students who require specialized transportation for a chronic medical disability are eligible for transportation, and students with a severe emotional and/or intellectual disability which requires support while they're on the bus are eligible for transportation. In terms of students in temporary housing, students who are in kindergarten through 6th grade who are living in homeless shelters, domestic violence shelters, or living doubled up are eligible for transportation. And then there are exceptions to the grade and distance requirements for students with medical needs, students living in foster care, students with living in joint custody situations, students who are the victim of a crime, students who have an order of protection, and students who have hazards along their route to school. And we'll go into more detail about those exceptions later. So in terms of eligibility that's based on grade and distance, students who are in grades kindergarten through 6th grade can receive busing based on distance if they live in the same district as the school and they attend a public school, or they live in the same borough as the school and they attend a charter school or a gifted and talented program. Students can only receive busing if a bus stop exists along their distance, a bus stop exists within the distance that is determined as eligible for busing based on their distance and grade, or if the route can be created to accommodate the student. So eligible students who meet the criteria for transportation will receive a Metro card if they're in grades 7 through 12, or if they're in grades kindergarten through 6th grade, if yellow bus service isn't available, or if a new stop can't be added for the student, or if the family prefers Metro cards over busing, they can receive Metro cards instead. And Metro cards will be provided by the schools. The schools should automatically set up busing if a student's eligible. We do, just in the event that it may not be entered, we do recommend that parents contact the schools directly to request busing, just in the event that it is not entered as it automatically should be. Families are eligible to receive Metro cards from their school until busing is set up. So if there's a lag time in between when the request is entered and when the student actually receives a route, they can travel by Metro card in the interim. Routing typically takes 5 to 7 days from when the request is entered to actually begin. If your family moves in the middle of the school year, you should inform the school of the new address immediately so that the school can change the address in the system and update the request for a new bus route, which again will take 5 to 7 business days to begin. Sorry, 5 to 7 days to begin. You can find more information about bus routes for your child's public school at the link at the bottom of this slide. If you put in your child's school code, so the borough number, the borough letter, and then the 3-digit school number, you'll see a list of routes associated with the school. So in terms of 3K and pre-K, generally 3K and pre-K students are not eligible for transportation. However, 3K and pre-K students in temporary housing and in foster care are eligible for transportation, typically Metro cards. Preschool age students with IEPs, which recommend a special class or a special class in an integrated setting, are entitled to curb to school busing, so door-to-door busing, and that busing is arranged by the Committee on Preschool Special Education, or the CPSE. So these are the eligibility exceptions that we mentioned for the grade and distance requirements. So joint custody, if parents or guardians no longer reside in the same home and the student is eligible for transportation, they may be eligible for busing to both addresses, to both parent or guardian's new addresses. But if only one address qualifies based on the grade and distance eligibility requirements, the student would only be eligible for busing to that address. If a student has been the victim of a crime outside of their school or on their way to or from school, they can be eligible for transportation. And we'll go into the process to request each of these exceptions later. Order of protection. If your child has an order of protection against another child or an adult, it should be immediately reported to your school. The school must immediately document that order to protect the child. And it needs to be entered into their systems as soon as possible to keep the child safe. Hazards. So students who are, again, kindergarten through 6th grade, if they have a hazard along their route to school, whether it's on their path to school, at the school bus stop, or at the public transit stop, they might qualify for an eligibility exception. So those hazards include narrow bridge or underpass, a railroad crossing, if there's no sidewalk, if it's a busy street without a stop sign, if there is a traffic light or a pedestrian crossing, if there's a busy street without a stop sign, traffic light, or a pedestrian crossing, or if there's a barrier that requires rerouting to a longer path. Those are all hazards where the student might qualify for a hazard exemption. So the following conditions do not apply for an exception: people loitering along the walkway, general concerns about crime in the area, unpaved road or sidewalks, traveling in the dark, or abandoned buildings along the walkway. Those are not reasons why a student would qualify for an exception. And then foster care, students who are living in foster care are eligible for transportation. So how to request those exceptions? You have a few options. You can either fill out a Google form, which is linked in this slide, or you can fill out the exception request form and then submit it to the Office of Pupil Transportation's busing exceptions at schools.nyc.gov email, or you can submit the form directly to your school and they will submit it to OPT. There are a few exceptions that require specific paperwork in addition to that exception request form, which can either be submitted as attachments along with the Google form, or it can be submitted directly to your school or to the email address that we mentioned. If you're filling out the exception form and any of these supplemental forms, you'll want to fill them out all together and submit them all together. So for students who are eligible for a joint custody exception, you'll need to submit legal documentation of the custody arrangement. And on the busing exception form, there's a calendar that details the students busing on a 2-week cycle. So you'll need to fill out that 2-week calendar completely to denote which house they're going to when. And both parents and guardians will need to sign the application. For the victim of a crime exception, you'll need to submit a police report, a school incident report, a report number, or a written statement by the child. And for the order of protection, you'll need to submit the order of protection along with the request for the exception.
Hi, all. I will first pause if there are any questions to be shared with the group.
Yeah, so just a couple of questions that came out in the Q&A. These slides will be sent to you tomorrow as a participant. When you receive an email from us thanking you for your participation, and we'll send the slides along with other relevant information for you to begin to advocate for your child or for your client. Someone else also asked if there is an application or an app that could track busing and show parents real-time arrival. Unfortunately, that is not available right now. That's not a service that the DOE provides. And so it is not an option for families at this time. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you. Now we'll begin with what is specialized busing. So this refers to school buses that are staffed by both a school bus driver and an attendant. So instead of being picked up at a centralized location, these students are picked up at the closest and safest stop to their residence, and we'll speak a bit more about that pickup and drop-off location. The DOE provides special transportation to students with either IEPs that recommend busing and or approved medical conditions. So for students with IEPs, the transportation needs should be discussed in an IEP meeting. Reasons why they can be added to an IEP meeting could be due to emotional or behavioral challenges, cognitive or communication difficulties, or physical or medical reasons. All reasons why IEP busing can be added to a student's IEP. Very important to note, once IEP is recommended on a student's busing, busing should be automatically arranged, and parents should not have to submit paperwork to add busing to the IEP every single year. For students, if the IEP team if busing is recommended by the IEP team, parents may be asked to complete an authorization for release of medical information pursuant to HIPAA. We'll refer to that as the HIPAA release and that should be completed and signed by the parent. Parents may also be asked to submit a medical accommodation request form, and please note this should be completed and signed by the student's doctor and not the parents. Now, for the second reason why a student may qualify for specialized busing for medical needs, and this is for students without IEPs, but that have medical needs that require transportation. And that could be either chronic or temporary medical conditions, short or long-term mobility reasons for why a student cannot take public transit also make you eligible for this transportation. And to apply for a medical exception, you can complete a Google form that is linked to this presentation, attaching that HIPAA release and that medical accommodation request form. Alternatively, you can submit an exception request form, the HIPAA release, and the medical accommodations form to the busing exception email discussed previously or to the school. And please note, it's really important that the doctor completes the medical form. And OPT will send the forms to the Office of School and Health to review, and this roughly takes 2 to 4 weeks to do. So as mentioned, specialized busing, the drop-off and pickups are a little different. So you can have stop-to-stop busing or curb to school. And by stop-to-stop, we mean the student is picked up at the DOE designated bus stop that is closest and safest to their home. And they're dropped off again at the closest and safest location to their home. There's also curb to school drop off, or you can think of it as door to door transportation. And this is for specialized transportation only. The student is picked up at the curb of their home and dropped off at the school. Now, once the student has busing, if the student requires an accommodation for the bus, and that could include a paraprofessional, it could be they require medical or nursing services while on the bus. It could be that due to any conditions such as, diabetes, that there should be limitations on how long a student is on the bus, climate control, safety vest, car seats. In order to have these accommodations, they should be added to the child's IEP or 504 plan. Accommodations of this sort do have to be renewed every school year. So that is very important to note. And parents should share documentation such as the HIPAA release completed by the parent or the medical accommodation request form completed by the doctor to the IEP team to obtain this form of accommodation for busing. And please note for, sorry, Janelle, if you can go back, for the medical accommodation request form, we advise families to speak to their doctors that they should be very specific about the child's need for this accommodation, and they need to include the exact accommodation requested, whether that is limited time, reason why, and should be completed onto the form, not to a document attached to the form. Now, if a student receives busing and families would like to request the child be dropped off at a different location than that child is picked up, families can request this alternate afternoon bus drop off by either completing an alternate drop off form, once more attached to this presentation, and emailing to the busing exceptions email address, or families can also complete this Google form that is available at the link included within the presentation. Please note it takes, after receipt, 5 to 7 days for it to be in effect.
So now I'm gonna pause again to see if there's any questions before we continue.
Sure. So I'm going to answer a couple of questions that I think are relevant for everyone to hear. Regarding medical exceptions, is there a specific approved list in terms of medical conditions? There's not a particular list, and so it's not limited that way. So we do suggest that families who believe that their child needs transportation related to a medical accommodation should have their doctors fill out the form and explain why, because there isn't a list that particularly limits it. There was also a question about busing for after school programming. Unfortunately, at this time, there is no busing for after school programming. There is a lot of advocacy being done around trying to get busing for recovery services, which are allegedly supposed to happen either after school or on Saturdays. Right now, there's no guarantee that that will actually happen, but there is a lot of advocacy around that currently happening. Regarding students in foster care, students in foster care should be able to receive busing. There was a question about if there's only a route available. If you are working with students in foster care and you're having difficulties obtaining a bus, there are particular people at the Office of Pupil Transportation, or OPT, that handle transportation for students in foster care. And if you go to the Q&A, there is contact information for the person who is in charge right now at OPT. A couple of other questions that came in while I was speaking. If a medical accommodation form is submitted to a school, will the denial be shared directly with family or only with the staff members of the school? That varies, unfortunately. Should be shared with both the parent and the school, but it's really unclear if that actually happens. Families should follow up with their school about this if the school is submitting it on their behalf. If the family is submitting it on their own, they should also be following up directly with the school, so to make sure that they get the answer from the Office of School Health, which is the agency that reviews the documentation. Go ahead, Daniela.
Thank you, Janelle. So now we're going to talk specifically about transportations for students in temporary housing. I do want to be clear that students in temporary housing are entitled to transportation, but transportation means either a Metro card or a bus. Not every student in temporary housing will be entitled to a bus if they don't meet other requirements. So a student in temporary housing can get a Metro card regardless of what grade they're on and regardless of distance. And if the student is in pre-K through 6th grade, then the parent can also get a Metro card, and it's usually a weekly Metro card to accompany the student to the school so that the student doesn't have to do the trek by themselves. And then students are entitled to busing if they live in a shelter and are in kindergarten through 6th grade. If they are in 7th to 8th grade in a shelter and have an IEP, but the IEP doesn't have busing on the IEP, and obviously students that have an IEP that includes busing are also entitled to busing. Additionally, while busing is being set up, the parents can ask for a Metro card, and the students can get that Metro card from their school, and the parents of K through 6 students can get the Metro cards from the family assistants or DOE regional managers in borough offices. And so can students if they don't get them at the school. You should make sure that the school has indicated the student in temporary housing status in the DOE computer system, which is called ATS, and has updated the address so that you can pick up the Metro cards and the student can actually get routed for the bus. And again, busing is guaranteed for students in a shelter K through 6, but students in other forms of temporary housing can receive a route if available, but they're not guaranteed one. And once families move to permanent housing, they can get transportation, whatever transportation they've been having, so either the Metro card or the bus, through the end of the school year. And again, they can request busing, but unless they meet the requirements that we just went through, busing is not guaranteed. So there's 3 ways to request busing for students in temporary housing. The first way is the shelter providers can complete a busing exemption request form, which I will show in a minute. The second way is the families can complete a special population request form, which again, I will show in a minute. Or the families and shelter providers can complete a request for exception to transportation rules and eligibility and email it to the DOE. Only one of these forms need to be submitted. And you don't need to submit these forms if a student already has busing on their IEP. It's just for families that want to request busing, that are in temporary housing, that the student does not have busing in their IEP. And just to note, for families residing in protected shelters, which includes, for example, DV shelters, you do not need to provide address for the shelter on any form. You can just enter the PO box assigned to the shelter. If a school is insisting that you need an address, explain to them that you are in a protected shelter. And if they don't understand what that means, then you can talk to your shelter about, what the next steps. So now I just want to show you what each of the 3 different forms would look like. So this is the first form, the shelters providers can complete. It would be like the green form. And again, that would only be for a shelter provider. So you can ask someone in the shelter to complete this form for you. The second option is the families can complete a special population request form, and it's kind of the purple one. And then the third option is either families or providers can complete this form and email it to busingexceptions@schools.nyc.gov. This form is again available in this link, which we will, once we show the whole presentation, you will have available. And you should make sure to copy the student and temporary housing manager for your shelter location on the email. Usually we recommend that either a shelter provider or a family ask the shelter provider to complete the first form, or that they complete the third form. And so now we're gonna, busing is set up, they've been approved for busing, the kid has busing on their IEP. How do you find out, the bus route, what time they're getting picked up, all these different things. So busing information for the most part can be found on the New York City Schools account portal. This portal is actually very helpful for, to find out other information on students. You can see the students' grades, the test scores. You can report bullying in the form. You can sign COVID consent forms. You can fill out emergency contact information. They also have classes through Parent University. And then you can also reset your child's DOE account password. This account is available or you'll see busing information for students that are in charter schools and public schools. And for students that are in non-publics or private schools, families should contact their school transportation liaison for any information regarding busing. And then as well for students who are in preschool, who are in preschool age and have busing on their IEP, they should also contact their school to figure out busing, because they might not have it available in their New York City schools account. So how do you create an account and the website? So the instructions are all in this DOE flyer, which you can again go to once we send you the presentation tomorrow. You can log in at schoolsaccount.nyc, and there's 3 different ways that you can create an account. So one, you can visit the child's school in person and ask to receive a temporary password in order to create the account. The second option is you can contact the child's school to verify their identity via teleconference and then receive a temporary password. The third option is use the account creation code on the letter that was sent home with students last year. Right now, there's only these 3 options, but if there's any other options available, the DOE will inform families. And so this is what the portal looks like once you are able to log in. And if you click on my student, so as you can see, you'll have the student's name, you'll have, my student, the parent university, and then bullying reporting. And then if you click on my student, you'll be able to see the next slide, which again has all these different options. You can look at grades, assessment, reading level, you can see the student's most current IEP, enrollment information in case you don't know, if your school, if your kid or someone or a family that you're working with, the student is moving into 6th grade or moving into 9th grade, and they're not sure where their student is enrolled, they can check enrollment. And then also there is the transportation kind of link that you can click on. And if you do click on that link, you will go to something like the next slide will show up, which basically shows the school that the child is attending, the type of service that they're getting in busing, and then any vehicle modifications that are necessary for the student. And then it should also have a route number, and it should have the pickup location, the drop-off location, and the bus company that's going to be servicing the student. This website or this page will not have a pickup or drop-off time. For a pickup or drop-off time, what you should do is contact the bus company directly, and you can do so by going to the website where all the in the DOE they have a list of all the different bus companies that service students. Find the bus company that services your student or the family, and then call the number. The number should also appear on the website and on the link at New York City Schools account, but if it does not, you can also find it on the DOE account, on the DOE website. If you should check in this form if anything is wrong, if the drop-off is wrong, if the pickup is wrong, if the accommodations or modifications are wrong, you should then reach out to the DOE to let them know that it's not, that something is not what it's supposed to be. So then we can go into troubleshooting, which I'm sure everyone has a lot of questions on. So again, if you need the route information or the name of the bus company, for the bus company information, you can look on the New York City Schools account. If you are going to public school or a charter school, if the child is going to a non-public school, then you should call the school. And if you need a pickup or drop-off time, you should contact the bus company directly. And if the bus is late or it's a no-show, you can check the bus OPT bus delay logs, which let you know if something happened and if the bus is still on their way, or if what's going on that day. But regardless, you should contact OPT at the number provided and file a complaint. You can describe what's happening with the transportation and ask to file a complaint, and then you should write down that complaint number that OPT gives you, so you can call and follow up if you need to make sure that they have addressed your concern and whatever issue was going on. Sometimes OPT will be busier than other times, so if you call and have a hard time reaching someone, you can wait for the end of the automated message and you will be connected to an operator, but it can take a while. And you should be calling back every time there's a problem. So if on Monday the bus is really late, you should call on Monday. And if on Tuesday the bus never shows up, you should call on Tuesday. And then if on Wednesday something else happens, you should be calling every single day to file these complaints. And that way you have a record of all the times that you have been trying to reach out to OPT to solve the same issue. And you can also contact the transportation liaisons, which are different depending on the borough and the type of school that the student attends. So on the next slide, you can see that for public school students, you can find all the borough and district level transportation liaison contact information on the link. For District 75 student, you can contact Sasha Inglis or Jacqueline Ortega or call the number provided. And then for non-public or charter schools, you can contact each of these people depending on where the non-public school is. And then we're gonna go through some hypos on what different things that that might happen during busing. So for instance, as we talked about before, usually bus route takes about 5 to 7 days to set up, but what if it's been 5 to 7 days and no busing has set up? You should first check the New York City Schools account to make sure that it hasn't been set up and there's no route there. If it's not on the New York City Schools account, you should contact the school to ask if the request for busing was submitted. If it hasn't, then ask them to submit it immediately. You should also contact the transportation liaison. And if it was submitted and they still haven't set up bus, then you should contact OPT to file a complaint that your child has not been routed. The second hypo is, what if your child's bus company never picks up the phone or has not contacted you about pickup time? Some days calling bus companies can be more difficult than others. I would recommend if there's a wait, to try to wait on the line, but if they're just never picking up or you're never able to get through, then you should contact OPT to file a complaint against the bus company. And again, if it's happening every single day and you still haven't been able to get pickup time or drop off time or what you're trying to get from the bus company, then you should be filing a complaint every day that you're not able to do that. And you should make sure to get that 9-digit complaint so that you can follow up on it later. What if your child was supposed to be picked up at 7:30 and it's 8:15 and no bus has come? You should call the bus company and ask about the status of the route. Usually they're able to tell you if the bus is running late, if something's going on, and they can tell you an updated pickup time. You should contact OPT and file a complaint or a series of complaints if it happens multiple days. And then again, make sure to save that 9-digit complaint number. So what if my child is spending hours on the bus, missing classes and arriving late to school? I'm sorry that this is so repetitive, but this is sometimes the reality of some of these issues. They're hard to resolve sometimes, but you should be contacting OPT and filing a complaint every time this happens. You should be contacting the transportation liaison from of the school, and then request another route each time you call. You can tell them, look, my kid is spending too much time on the bus, they're missing classes, everything that's going on, and then ask them to be rerouted so that they can go in on a route that is not arriving to school late every day. And again, make sure to save all the 9-digit complaint numbers every time you call. If you're having trouble with busing for a kid that is in preschool age and has busing on their IEP, you should contact early childhood busing at schools.nyc.gov and then copy the preschool.afcnyc email. And what if my child's IEP recommends a bus paraprofessional and they still don't have one? You should contact the IEP team to see if a bus paraprofessional has been requested. And if your child attends a non-public school or charter school, then you should contact the CSE, and you should also contact the DOE special education offices at the email provided or the number. And I just want to note that students that are entitled to busing can receive a prepaid car service or reimbursement for the cost of transportation while they're waiting for the bus to either show up on time or be routed or anything like that. So we'll talk about how that can happen. So the DOE has set up a car service called Limosis. It's a prepaid app-based service, and it's available to students who are entitled to busing but aren't receiving it. So for public school students, you can talk to the school transportation liaisons at school to arrange Limosis. And you can also contact the transportation liaison at the borough district office through the link provided. For the charter schools, you should, and non-public school, you should also contact the transportation liaison. And for District 75 students, you should be contacting the Sasha Ingles, Jacqueline Ortega on the email or the phone number provided. And you should also be contacting the transportation liaison for if you're in a non-public school, charter school, or D75, if you have any of the difficulties that we described above. And so if for any reason Limosis is not, you're not being able to set it up, or one day the bus is really, really late and you end up having to send your kid in another transportation that you had to fund yourself, you may be entitled to reimbursement if the child's related services are located outside of their school or their home, and the child was unable to get to travel through a DOE issued Metro card. If the student transitioned between temporary housing locations, if they recently transitioned between foster care placements, and if there was a substantial bus delay that resulted in a no-show, or the bus company refused to provide service for the child, you would be able to fill out this specific form that you can see below and email the completed form to the transportation reimbursement schools. Another option that you have, if you look at the next slide, is you can fill out the Google form, and you should screenshot the confirmation at the end, just in case you don't get a response in an appropriate time frame. You have the proof that you sent it, or you can again fill out the PDF form that we linked in the previous slide, but you can also see what it should look like here and send it to, again, transportation reimbursement at schools.nyc.gov. And finally, we just wanted to reiterate that parents do have the right to get documents translated, and that includes the report cards, IEV, but it also includes transportation information. And parents also have the right to interpretation services at school meetings and events. And the DOE languages are that they should be able to translate all documents to are listed below. But they should also be able to get interpretation services beyond those languages during meetings or anything related to your child. And if you have any problems with getting translations or interpretations for your child's, for anything related to your child, you can email the email listed below or call the DOE complaint 9 and the number listed below as well. Finally, we do provide, Advocates for Children does provide updates on different things related to education advocacy and different things that the DOE, implements or doesn't implement. And we also provide updates for future workshops, changes in law, and know your rights material. So make sure to sign up for our newsletter to get monthly updates. And please call us if you have any questions. We do have a helpline, as we mentioned before, and you will either be able to speak to someone directly, or someone will call you back and try to help you with whatever you need. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. So there have been a number of questions, particularly about what to do with complaints and how it's not particularly hasn't been that helpful sometimes, especially within the last year with OPT kind of getting rid of their customer service line and not really being able to answer as many questions as they used to. And we definitely agree with all of you in the frustration of that. OPT's resistance to wanting to take complaints over the phone has definitely caused a lot of problems. But as Daniela mentioned, once you call, if you wait for all of the sort of menu options to go down, you can reach somebody and you should make a complaint over the phone You should also be making complaints with the transportation liaisons at the district level and the school level, all of which the contact information were provided during this presentation, and you will receive tomorrow. All the links in this presentation are live links that have email addresses and websites for forms, as well as contact information that you can use in order to be advocate for your clients if you're a professional, or for your children if you are a parent. And it is unfortunately a very tedious process, and it is not, as someone mentioned in one of the Q&As, it's not getting at the root of the problem, right? None of this presentation is getting at the root of the issue in terms of what is causing transportation delays and is causing sort of the breakdown of transportation. But these right now are the best ways for you to try to be able to resolve many of the issues that happen with transportation. There are someone asked again, the slides will be sent to you tomorrow. The medical accommodations forms, I think someone asked, as we mentioned earlier, they should be sent to busing exceptions at schools.nyc.gov. That's where they will be reviewed and sent to the Office of School Health. It can also be shared with the school team, the IEP team, who will also share them with OPT and the Office of School Health to review. So it depends. If your child has an IEP and you're filling out the medical accommodation form, you should share it with your child's IEP team. If your child does not have an IEP and you're requesting a medical accommodation for transportation, then it should be sent to busing exceptions at schools.nyc.gov. And I'm just going to launch a poll really quick as we finish up and answer a couple of questions if you can answer these as well. Is there a maximum time that students should be allowed on the bus? Generally speaking, if your child is on the bus for more than like 2 hours one way, we would suggest you start making complaints. There isn't like a standard time that OPT has said, but we suggest that if your child is on the bus for 2 hours, 2 hours only to get to school or 2 hours only to get home, that you should start making a complaint and ask for an alternate route, because that's pretty excessive. I know that isn't a specific answer, but it is definitely what we would suggest you doing in terms of advocacy for your child. Is busing providing to students who have been suspended and need to go to an alternative learning center? It's busing, the transportation should be provided to students who attend alternate learning centers. It depends on their age and their grade and their circumstances, whether or not they will receive busing. So that's a pretty specific question related to the circumstances of the student. If they're an older, for example, if they're a high school student, they'll receive a Metro card. They most likely will not receive bus transportation. We have a list of local representatives or liaisons for each borough to contact them. So on Danielle, Anna, can you go back to the transportation liaison slide, please, while we're here? Okay. So for students who attend public schools, what families should do is they should go to this first link here, and they'll put in their school's name. And when they put in their school's name, there'll be a list of contact information for people for a number of different issues, including transportation. And so you can find your district level or borough support level transportation liaison at that link. For District 75, we just provided the exact people because those are the people that handle transportation for all District 75 students across the city. If you're working with a family or you are a parent whose child attends a charter or non-public school, these are a list of the exact people that you should contact related to transportation. It depends. Some, like for Brooklyn, for example, there's a specific person for non-public schools and there's a specific person for charter schools. And for Manhattan, it puts them together, right? Mr. Conquest is responsible for both charter and for non-public schools. So this is a really good resource for everyone. and it could be used to make sure that you are able to advocate for your family, Um, Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. If that's it, we're going to end this presentation, and we suggest if you have any other questions related to transportation, please feel free to respond to the email you receive tomorrow with the materials and the transcript and the PowerPoint. You can respond with questions and we will get back to you. You're also free to call our helpline with any questions related to transportation, or if you need assistance submitting any forms or confused as to which forms that you need to submit for any request. So again, please feel free to contact us at our email or at our helpline. And we wish you all the best of luck in trying to resolve your transportation issues. And if you can please fill out this feedback survey before you log off, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.